Hey everyone, tonight we're slipping gently into the ingenious and occasionally absurd world of the Renaissance. A time when art, science, and just a bit of madness danced hand in hand across Europe. We'll wander through candlelit workshops where inventors dreamed up armored turtles, musical birds, and clocks that chimed with flair. We'll sit quietly in courtly halls as peacocks strut by clockwork and soup stirs itself while no one's looking. From battlefields to banquet tables, from sketchbooks to soaring cathedrals, this journey will take us deep into an age where every corner of life, no matter how ordinary, was an opportunity to build something extraordinary, or at least hilariously ambitious. But before we dive in, let me know if you're enjoying this kind of gentle history. Feel free to tap that like button and subscribe, only if you truly love the story. And in the comments, share where you're tuning in from and what time it is in your city. I always love seeing our little bedtime crew gathering from every corner of the world. Now, lower your lights, maybe let a soft fan hum in the background, and settle in. Let's ease into tonight's quiet journey together. Chapter 1: Military Inventions. In the dawn of the Renaissance, war was not fought by simple swords and horses alone. Far from it. Imagine generals pacing in brick study halls, poring over blueprints of fantastical war machines, gear-driven chariots, giant crossbows, and wooden shells on wheels. These contraptions were designed to terrify enemy armies, or at least to look terrifying in dusty castles and courtyard workshops. Today, we'll wander through some of these odd inventions, so bizarre you might mistake them for the fever dream of a sleepless engineer. First, feast your eyes on Leonardo da Vinci's armored tank. Yes, Leonardo wasn't just about smiley paintings. He sketched a giant wooden car on wheels, bristling with cannons all around. The idea was to roll the steel, wood and metal beast into battle. In theory, it would hide a team of gunners safe inside while they blasted at enemies in every direction. In practice, one can only imagine it moving so slowly that a tortoise in a race would win. Still, this turtle tank with its crazy many guns makes you wonder, perhaps it wasn't made for speed, but to make an enemy do a double take. Nearby lies a monstrous crossbow tower. Picture a wooden fortress on wheels, launching massive arrows. It's a bit like a siege engine baby in a stroller. The designers thought, why fling one boulder at a time when you can launch dozens? So they built multi-tiered contraptions to speed things up. All these wheels and pulleys look impressive, but a general probably had to agree. Impressive. Now can you make it actually hit something? The crew likely answered by running even faster, like they were late to dinner. But perhaps the weirdest of all is the multi-barrel gun. Leonardo sketched one that looked like a metal flower. Dozens of small guns mounted in a circle on a wheel. Spin the wheel, fire once, then advance to the next barrel as in a manual revolver. In theory, it could let you shoot a volley of bullets without reloading each time. In practice, it probably jammed more than it fired, and the gunners had a higher chance of shooting their own boots. It's hard to be sure our records of how well these actually worked are, let's just say, spotty. But imagine an army lined up, each soldier stuck behind a rotating bouquet of muskets. Comical? Isn't it? Leonardo even dreamed up an early scuba suit. Yes, water warfare too. This was basically a leather diving suit with a breathing tube to the surface. The plan was for divers to sneak up on enemy ships from underwater. Snorkel extraordinaire. Of course, such an idea was risky, like sending a manatee to do the job of a shark. The Renaissance engineer probably hadn't tested it fully. Otherwise, he might have added an oxygen tank and a medal from a mermaid association. But just picturing someone in a leather sack suit bobbing under a boat seems almost quaint. Not all Renaissance war ideas came from Italy. Others included inventions like a 50-barrel cannon, made by stacking small cannons together, and a wagon fort design, think mobile fort on wheels, to protect infantry. One engineer proposed catapulting flaming pigs into enemy lines, though that sounds more like a prank than a plan. When careful thinkers list these schemes, the tone is equal parts awe and really, it was a time of boundless imagination. Guns that could shoot in every direction, and portable planks of wood to duck behind when someone opened fire. As dusk falls on these curious war machines, we step back from the clang of armor and the rattle of gears. The battlefield may have been full of confidence in technology, but at the end of the day, most of these inventions stayed on paper. Still, they remain a testament to Renaissance creativity. War through wonder and machinery meant to strike fear, or at least inspire one exasperated shrug among opponents. The cannon's last boom has faded. Now, in the stillness, we quietly turn our attention to another realm entirely, one of healing hands and haunted hospitals. Chapter 2: Medical Inventions. The medical world of the Renaissance was as wacky as it was wise. Doctors and alchemists held surgical trials under flickering candlelight, mixing mystical potions and performing dubious procedures. If war inventors were creative, the healers were downright eccentric. Imagine attending a surgery conducted by someone who also believed in astrology. The cure for fever might just be to drink your own urinated wine under a waxing moon. Bloodletting was the order of the day. Armies of leeches, not soldiers, did the heavy lifting. Barbers doubled as surgeons, sawing legs or plucking teeth as easily as they trimmed beards. There were ingenious devices for sucking blood, vacuum pumps made of pine wood, brass, and bone, believed to balance the humors. To the Renaissance mind, nothing says medicine quite like slicing a vein and watching life seep into a silver bowl. Don't try this at home. The ratio of bandages to bedtime. Stories is quite high. Respiratory ailments were treated with charcoal and fumes. One genius design was a kind of respirator, a metal tube strap like an early snorkel or gas mask so that one might breathe cleaner air in plague-ridden streets. Unfortunately, often the air was as foul as the patient's chances of a recovery, but at least it made them look serious and confident while wheezing. Perhaps most haunting was the use of trepanation. That's drilling holes in the skull to let out the evil humors or bad spirits. Yes, the Renaissance cure for headache was a literal crack in the noggin. A skull saw and a bottle of brandy to dull the pain. How soothing. If the patient didn't faint from the drill or the smell of antiseptic, which was just burnt chicken, by the way, they might walk out saying, "That's one way to clear my mind." Madness and insomnia had their own contraptions too. Doctors built spinning chairs and slides, thinking shaking the senses would shake the illness away. Picture your grandmother on a chair with straps, going round and round until her wig flew off. If only it would rearrange the humors along the way. Electrocuting fish were inserted into warm baths and electric eel therapy, jolting patients. Then there were magnets on the head to scare away devils, maybe? It all sounds like trying to treat a hangover with fireworks, but some swore by it. Perhaps it was the thrill of the ride that cured them, if only with nap time. Apothecaries brewed extravagant cures, mercury for syphilis, which often just made patients salivate more than survive, arsenic for, well, you didn't want what it cured, but they tried, or simply finely ground pearls and pearls' children beads ingested or slapped onto the skin at an expense. If something didn't kill you outright, it was said to cure something lesser. Somewhere in there was wisdom, or at least convincing salesmanship. The idea that you could use snake venom or powdered mummy in water would make any modern-day patient politely decline. Still, Renaissance thought was, every ailment had a remedy, however improbable. Anatomy was blossoming, 2. Leonardo himself secretly dissected bodies to map the human form. Some of the first anatomical drawings were born in that age. These pioneers saw the body as a machine, parts interlocking like clockworks. Oddly enough, those early sketches were often more accurate than the doctor's understanding of disease. But they made for great evening reading. Ah, you have plague? Here's a cat drawn with tubes. At least the artists tried to keep their models alive for study, hopefully with consent or at least a return policy. By day's end, patients mostly survived or hopped home in whatever condition they were in. Doctors were proud of their instruments, even if patients worried a little. The Renaissance healed as best it could, with a saw here, a potion there, and one big dose of confidence, sometimes misplaced. As night falls on leeches and potions, we move from the dim shade of the clinic to the bright atelier of the artists, where paint and invention dance a quieter waltz. Chapter 3: Artistic Inventions. Away from battlefields and sick rooms, the Renaissance also fueled wild creativity in art. And not just in the paintings, but in the very tools of the trade. Picture artists tinkering with contraptions meant to capture perspective or spin paint on its own. It was an age where the art of the masterpiece required mechanical help. Imagine, once upon a time, a painter dragging a contraption more complicated than his subject into the studio. Yes, even the act of painting was a bit mechanical. Consider the camera obscura, a tent or box with a pinhole that projected the outside world onto the canvas. Think of it like a ghost shadow projector. Some artists used it to trace scenes from life onto their panel. That way, if you struggled to make a horse look like a horse, at least you could trace a real one. It was cheating, perhaps, but our Renaissance forebears were practical. Who wouldn't want a free outline from nature when your paints can do all the heavy lifting? Perspective was a big deal. One invention was the perspective machine, a frame that held a wire and a lens. The artist had to stand still, look through a hole, and trace where the string crossed the world. The result? Perfect perspective lines every time. Except for the part where an artist had to hold absolutely still and certainly looked ridiculous with his head in a contraption. It was basically drawing with a built-in cheat device, which is ironically the dream of any sleepwriter wanting to speed up the bedtime story. Sure, just plug my eye into the stand and let's see. Of course, there were tools for the messy parts, too. One genius invented a paint-grinding mill. Creamy pigments required mashing minerals and plants until they were powder. Fabulously tedious work. Someone rigged a leather crank mill. Pour stones in, turn a wheel, out come the smooth colors. It was art meets food processor, and any tired painter was grateful. Less pounding by hand, more sipping wine by the fire. Some wanted automata to stir paint. We don't know if it actually worked. Perhaps the wind blew a napkin through and that was the secret ingredient. Think chairs for artists were ordinary? No way. There were specialized chairs and easels on wheels and pulleys. Michelangelo himself used a crazy scaffolding harness to paint the Sistine Chapel ceiling. He was practically upside down for years. Some simply invented a rotating painting holder. Turn a crank and the canvas flips to dry or show a different side. It's like a Renaissance lazy Susan for art. Modern artists might envy this. Rather than getting up, just spin your portrait like a pie. Pigments were another alchemy. From poisonous chrome oxide, ouch, to crushed beetles for red, painters mixed potions as carefully as scientists. Ever heard of Tyrian purple? It's from snails. Painters essentially painted with bug guts and gemstones. And then, they figured out contraptions to stabilize paint. They had primitive airbrush-like tools using bellows to spray liquid color. The results were often sticky. But that's history. And of course, innovations to please the eye. Improved glasses for tiny details, magnifiers on stands, better brushes. One clever Milanese workshop even made a mechanical assistant. Not a robot, but a series of mirrors. Two artists could paint the same piece, one wearing a mirror contraption that made him mimic the other's every move. Handy if you had an apprentice, lazy colleagues, or an evil twin you wanted to duplicate. All these artistic gadgets are quiet now, perhaps abandoned in dusty studios. The paintbrushes bristle silently. Still, they remind us that even in creativity, the Renaissance mind sought comfort in machines, tools to ease the drudgery of color mixing or to ensure the perfect vanishing point, all to put masterpieces in motion without too much motion from the artist. Because, after all, standing still can be tiring, and with that gentle twirl of a brush, we transition from pigments to planets. Chapter 4: Scientific Inventions. The Renaissance wasn't just about art and war. It was a golden age of science, too. Curiosity burned in scholars' hearts as they charted the heavens, experimented with nature, and searched for the secrets of life. This was centuries before smartphones, yet the devices they built to study the world were anything but simple. Giant astrolabes, clunky primitive telescopes, curious fountains to measure heat, they filled libraries and tower rooms. Let's gently tiptoe through some of these erudite contraptions. Alchemy was like the first cool chemistry class. Alchemists dreamed of making gold from lead and finding the elixir of life. They built elaborate retorts and alembics, basically glassware on steroids. It was a lot of boiling and concentrating, often producing strange fumes. One device was a double furnace with twisted glass chimneys. They believed it purified substances. What they sometimes got was exotic-smelling socks. Yet, it's thanks to these experiments that glass-making and distillation improved. Without them, no colognes or cheap liquor. Instruments to map the heavens were everywhere. The armillary sphere, a metal model of the universe with rings for Earth, Moon, and stars, was all the rage. Think of a 3D planet model you spin by hand. It was mostly decorative and dizzying, but scholars swore it helped them imagine orbits. They also invented early telescopes, though later thinkers improved them. Still, even then, stargazers squinted at the sky through candles. Scrawling page clocks, oh the clocks. Renaissance engineers chased perfect time. Water clocks and candle clocks kept nobles punctual. One genius dreamed up a weight-driven clock with a pendulum. It was 16th century, too early to work flawlessly, but it was headed in the right direction. Meanwhile, others burned incense sticks at measured rates as a timer. Imagine timing a duel by how fast a stick of incense burns. I have to say, that might be the most fragrant way to mark an hour, if also somewhat dangerous. Countless tinkerers attempted to make vacuums. A famous pump by Torricelli showed air pressure by mercury columns. But try convincing a layperson then that empty space actually exists. It was easier to proclaim a little demon lives in the glass and holds the mercury up. On the bright side, experiments with air and water led to barometers and deep theories about atmospheres, delightfully complex stuff to drowse through on a starry night. Here's something magnetic. William Gilbert, a Renaissance scientist, wrote De Magnete and described how Earth itself is a giant magnet. He built a huge iron sphere to test it. Think a ball the size of a head that, when rotated, behaved like our globe. An early breakdown if Earth had worked properly. Yes, we can all slide down the field lines now. He also invented one of the first compasses for navigation. So, thanks to him, sailors finally stopped bumping into wrong continents. Toward the end of the era, folks like Galileo turned those spyglasses to the sky, seeing the craters on the moon for the first time. I mention it because it feels like the end of our regency of crazy gadgets. The Renaissance gave way to the Baroque, but before we go, imagine lying on a deck chair back then, peering through a crude telescope and seeing something no one had ever drawn. It must have been mind-blowing, like waking up from a dream that starts only after you put on special glasses. The devices of this age paved the way for future science. Inventions that seemed a bit wild at the time, like vacuum pumps or magnetic machines, were the first steps to understanding nature. Maybe some worked, many didn't, but each was built with earnest wonder. As our scholar blows out a candle in the observatory, planets continue on their course. With that, we leave the lofty chase of stars and return to Earth, straight into the cozy world of daily. Chapter 5: Daily Life Gadgets. After battles, cures, art, and science, it's time for the daily bits. Yes, the Renaissance had its fair share of home and leisure inventions, some practical, some, well, absurd. The day-to-day involved tasks that inventors saw fit to simplify. If you thought early people just labored all day, think again. They invented gadgets for chores, grooming, and even games. A Renaissance household wasn't all straw and stress. There were contraptions to make life interesting. Cleaning and cooking saw clever devices. For example, consider the hearth itself. Certain kitchens had spit turners rigged with weights or falling coal that automatically turned roasts. Take a weight, tie it to a gear, drop it, and the pig spins itself, slowly draped in savory juices. It's like a precursor to modern electric rotisseries, except here you might have to climb a ladder to reset the weight. Not exactly hands-free, but close enough. Similarly, scrubbing floors got a mechanical boost, a rotating brush powered by foot pedals. Think of it as an early vacuum minus the noise and with double the exercise. Timekeeping devices crept into daily life too. Forget a watch in your pocket. Pocket watches were just around the corner. Instead, people had personal clocks. Tiny clock on chain? Yes. One fellow had a clock that hung from his girdle. You know the phrase, watch your step? Back then it was watch the watch on your step because those chain watches sometimes swung into the soup bowl. By the late Renaissance, mini clocks existed at all, though they only kept time for half a day, which was fine because most nobles had servants to tap their shoulder every 6. Grooming got gadgets too. Ladies and gentlemen sported mechanical items like hair rollers heated on the fire, ouch, and curling irons that had stand attachments so they could heat them and set them aside. Mirrors were precious. First ones were polished metal, then glass framed by wealth. Some were even attached to contraptions. Open one, and springs would pop out a hidden brush and comb set. A Renaissance person could spend 15 minutes just getting dressed, which is actually a bit shorter than some people today. Sleeping arrangements had their own inventions. Beds often had canopy designs with curtains to keep drafts and boogeymen out. Some had built-in bottles and fans. In one curious example, a craftsman built a bed with a foot pump. Every time the occupant moved, air would circulate or a small glass of wine would pop out from a secret compartment. Okay, that last part might be a legend, but wouldn't it be great if true? And because people were terrified of nocturnal mischief, there were even alarm candles, candles that, when burnt down to a certain point, would drop a steel ball to clatter a pot and wake the sleeper. Probably not recommended for the faint of heart, but it shows they made attempts at alarm centuries before the iPhone did it with a tap. Then there were the puzzles and locks, for fun or for hoarding. Novelty boxes, known as puzzle locks, were carved wood or metal boxes that wouldn't open unless you twisted the parts in the right sequence. People had small safes for coins that required multiple steps to unlock. Think less numeric keypad, and more, this wooden dragon must be tickled and the left wing lifted. It amused nobles to have these. It probably felt like early video game levels. Coffee was just arriving in Europe by the late Renaissance, but tea was known. Someone always invented a nice way to brew or serve it. Perhaps a mechanized drip filter on a stand, turning slowly to drip hot water onto leaves. Or an automatic tea towel dispenser, pull here and a fresh cloth appears. Though that one might be Victorian, we may not have actually invented that yet. But the idea of creature comforts was in the air, even if largely through feather beds and alembics. Leisure inventions were charming too. Board games, yes, but also automata. Little mechanical musicians, wooden birds that sang, or even early riding simulators, wooden structures that let a child pretend to gallop on a horse via bouncing up and down. Everything was heavy and manual. Nothing was plugged in, of course. Instead of batteries, a Renaissance gadget might use an eggshell trigger or a falling grain of sand to set it in motion. Day's end for these inventors and tinkerers might not have brought complete ease, but at least they tried. Spare a thought for those who grappled with gears and pulleys to boil water or comb hair. The Renaissance household was not just toil. It was filled with curious experiments in comfort. As the candles burn low and the mechanical rooster on the dresser stops crowing, we have toured an era where every realm of life, war, healing, art, science, and home, had its imaginative contraptions. The inventions may have been weird, even ineffective, but they were preludes to modern machines. And all of them, no matter how strange, serve as a gentle reminder. Sometimes even the craziest ideas in history were the product of brilliant minds tinkering to change the world. Chapter 6: Transportation and Exploration Inventions. The Renaissance was not content merely to reimagine war, healing, art, science, and domestic life under the sunlit arches of Florence and Venice. It also thrust humanity into motion. Before the internal combustion engine or the pressurized cabin of an airliner, Renaissance engineers sketched contraptions that would propel people across land, sea, and even into the air, if only for a moment. In this chapter, we'll embark on a journey through the boldest, strangest proposals for transportation and exploration from the 15th and 16th centuries. Some designs promise to conquer oceans, others to vault through the air like birds, and a few, quite humorously, to traverse swamps without wetting one's socks. Each invention teems with the era's trademark blend of audacious ambition and impractical execution, perfect for a meandering bedtime tale. It begins on cobbled streets and dirt roads, where horse-drawn carriages ruled. Horsepower, after all, was literal. Yet even these venerable beasts inspired inventors to tinker. One Milanese craftsman envisioned a self-propelled carriage powered by springs, essentially a giant clock on wheels. He drew blueprints of tightly coiled metal springs in a chassis. Turn a crank to win the springs, release the brake, and off you'd go, perhaps for a few dozen feet before the contraption rolled to a ponderous halt. The inventor, however, never tested a full-scale model, likely aware that horses deliver more consistent power than wound-up steel. Still, one can picture a nobleman climbing in, winding the key like a cuckoo clock, and then sighing as his carriage sputtered forward. A more utilitarian idea came from Padua, where a scholar proposed a land yacht, a wheeled vehicle propelled by sail. By day's end, Venice's canals had taught sailors the elegance of wind power, so why not on land? The design featured a triangular sail atop a wooden frame mounted on 4 wheels, with a rudder at the back for steering. In a brisk coastal breeze, one might glide along a flat plain at surprising speed. The catch? Renaissance roads were seldom flat, and gusty crosswinds could flip the contraption like a toppled tablecloth. Contemporary reports suggest one prototype careened into a wattle fence, leaving its creator dusting off splinters and rethinking the merits of terra firma. Of course, horses remained the workhorses of the road, pun fully intended, but even equine transportation received mechanical augmentations. In France, a barber surgeon patented a mechanical stirrup, an intricate device of pulleys and levers mounted on the saddle. It promised to raise and lower the rider with minimal effort, thereby easing the strain of long justs or pilgrimages. Yet testers found the apparatus more likely to pinch one's britches than to lift them gracefully. It may have eaten more socks than miles. Beyond land, the sea beckoned for daring innovations. Shipbuilders in Genoa and Lisbon vied to cross uncharted waters, but traditional galleys and carracks had limitations. Slow speeds, reliance on oars and wind, and a tendency to leak if improperly caulked. Enter the double-hulled ship, a proto-catamaran conceived by a Venetian maritime engineer. Two narrow hulls were connected by a raised platform, reducing drag and increasing stability. According to sketches, the vessel could sail faster and resist capsizing in choppy Mediterranean waves. Unfortunately, there's scant evidence anyone built more than a scale model. Perhaps the financial backers balked at funding a vessel that looked like two canoes. Meanwhile, a Portuguese innovator imagined a submerged observation chamber, a diving bell for undersea exploration. His design featured a large bell-shaped contraption of oak and metal, lowered into the water by ropes. Air trapped inside would allow an observer to descend a few fathoms and inspect shipwrecks or coral reefs. Reports claim a maiden voyage descended for meters, only for seawater to seep through the wooden seams, filling the bell and prompting a panicked scramble to the surface. Nevertheless, it remains one of the earliest recorded attempts at underwater archaeology, even if the archaeologist emerged sodden and disappointed. But perhaps the most tantalizing quest of the Renaissance was flight. Long before Montgolfier's balloons and Wright siblings powered flights, thinkers scribbled designs for human-carrying gliders, parachutes, and even flying machines with flapping wings. Leonardo da Vinci produced dozens of sketches, ornithopters, helicopters, and parachutes, and wrote copious notes in mirror script. One of his designs, often called the aerial screw, resembled a giant corkscrew turreted above a tubular frame. The idea was that by turning the screw, air would be forced downward, lifting the machine into the sky. In modern wind tunnels, such a device would require an engine far more powerful than human muscle to spin the screw fast enough. In the Renaissance, it remained a paper dream. Yet Leonardo's sheer audacity in imagining airborne travel captivates even today, as though he sketched an advertisement for the future. Beyond Da Vinci, lesser-known inventors toyed with parachutes. A French nobleman crafted a wooden frame in the shape of an inverted pyramid, overlaid with linen, intended to slow one's descent from castle towers or belaying masts. He tested it by leaping from a platform only to crash into a haystack, and not cleanly, leaving him bruised but alive. The test nonetheless proved that drag devices could indeed break falls. It would be centuries, however, before parachuting became a refined science rather than a dangerous party trick. Other dreamers pursued winged gliders. One Italian tinker proposed a bat-like apparatus. Flexible wooden ribs covered in oiled silk, strapped to the arms and legs, allowing the user to leap from hillsides and glide gently to earth. Modern enthusiasts have built replicas of similar Renaissance gliders, and while they can indeed glide short distances, controlling direction and landing safely proved challenging. The historical account tells of an early test flight ending in a tumble through a vineyard, where the pilot emerged not with a triumphant eagle's cry, but with grapes crushed under his frame. Renaissance explorers, meanwhile, needed reliable compasses and maps to traverse uncharted seas. Magnetic compasses had existed for centuries, but inventors tweaked them for greater accuracy. One ingenious variant enclosed the floating magnetized needle within a gimbal, a set of pivoting rings, so it remained level even when the ship pitched. Sailors found this helpful in stormy weather. Unfortunately, the gimbal mechanism could bind up if the rings were crudely filed or rusted, turning the compass into a paperweight. It's said that one captain, guided by a seized compass, inadvertently sailed his ship in circles for a fortnight before switching to stellar navigation. Mapping itself became an art. Cartographers used new projection techniques and surveying instruments like the theodolite. One curious device combined a quadrant, an alidade, and a plumb line to measure angles between landmarks. An Italian surveyor carried it strapped to his chest like a giant breastplate, pausing repeatedly to sight distant hills and churches. The result was ever more accurate maps, but also a slew of portraits depicting surveyors who looked perpetually distracted, standing in the rain with a bulky contraption blocking half their vision. On land, river and canal navigation received mechanized attention. In Holland, engineers developed the concept of a chain ferry, a flat-bottomed boat guided across a waterway by chains attached to either bank. The boat, anchored to the chain, could be pulled by muscle or wind. The sturdy design endured, but early chains snapped if overloaded, casting boats adrift. By the end of the Renaissance, the Dutch had refined the system enough to ferry cows and carriages across canals reliably. By now, conveyors and early funiculars also appeared in drama-laden scripts. One hillside mining operation in Germany rigged up a series of wooden rails and pulley-driven carts to haul or uphill. The principle was simple. Horses or manpower on one end pulled a loaded cart up while an empty cart descended to balance the load. It's a gravity-assisted seesaw of industrial efficiency. Miners likely welcomed the respite from manual hauling, although accidents with snapped ropes were not unheard of. One cart reportedly trundled back downhill unattended, scattering panicked workers like bowling pins. Finally, the road to modern transport must nod to the burgeoning ideas of a canal network. Renaissance planners in Italy sketched canals to link inland lakes and rivers, a precursor to the European canal boom of the following centuries. They envisioned locks operated by simple wooden gates and manual pumps, allowing boats to rise and fall with the changing water levels. Building these systems, however, required vast labor. Some proposals languished unbuilt because nobles would rather commission a marble statue than dig a trench by hand. In sum, the Renaissance era's transportation and exploration inventions were a symphony of ambition. Carriages that wound themselves up like clocks, land yachts skimming plains under sail, armored diving bells, wind-powered sea vessels, proto-compasses, interactive maps, experimental gliders, and the ever-alluring dream of flight. Many designs never cleared architectural skepticism, funding gaps, or the harsh test of field trials. Some performed spectacularly poorly, others showed genuine promise. Yet all sprang from hearts that believed humanity could move faster, traverse farther, and explore deeper than ever before. As you drift towards sleep, imagine these contraptions humming in silent workshops, gears awaiting a key turn, sails waiting for a breeze, wings trembling for a leap, each a testament to Renaissance creativity poised on the cusp of motion. Tomorrow, we'll continue with Chapter 7, where we'll examine how communication and information sharing underwent similarly inventive transformations during this extraordinary age. Finally, the road to modern transport must nod to the burgeoning ideas of a canal network. Renaissance planners in Italy sketched canals to link inland lakes and rivers, a precursor to the European canal boom of the following centuries. They envisioned locks operated by simple wooden gates and manual pumps, allowing boats to rise and fall with the changing water levels. Building these systems, however, required vast labor. Some proposals languished unbuilt because nobles would rather commission a marble statue than dig a trench by hand. In some, the Renaissance era's transportation and exploration inventions were a symphony of ambition. Carriages that wound themselves up like clocks, land yachts skimming planes under sail, armored diving bells, wind-powered sea vessels, proto-compasses, interactive maps, experimental gliders, and the ever-alluring dream of flight. Many designs never cleared architectural skepticism, funding gaps, or the harsh test of field trials. Some performed spectacularly poorly, others showed genuine promise. Yet all sprang from hearts that believed humanity could move faster, traverse farther, and explore deeper than ever before. As you drift towards sleep, imagine these contraptions humming in silent workshops, gears awaiting a key turn, sails waiting for a breeze, wings trembling for a leap, each a testament to Renaissance creativity poised on the cusp of motion. Chapter 7: Communication and Information Sharing Inventions. The Renaissance mind was not content simply to invent machines that moved troops, cured maladies, or propelled painters' brushes. It also revolutionized how people communicated and shared information. In an age before telephones, telegraphs, or the internet, the spread of news, ideas, and knowledge depended on ingenious contrivances, some mechanical, some conceptual, that bridged distances and preserved words for posterity. In this chapter, we'll drift through the slow, fascinating world of Renaissance communication inventions, from elaborate cipher devices and message-carrying pigeons to printing presses that jolted Europe awake with a deluge of type. Each innovation tells a tale of changing times and of minds that long to shrink the world by sharing thoughts more swiftly, more accurately, and, at times, more secretly. Long before mass media, letters reigned supreme. Wealthy patrons employed scribes to write correspondence on fine parchment or vellum, often folded and sealed with wax stamps bearing family crests. But as armies and merchants crisscrossed Europe, theft and interception became real risks. One Italian nobleman commissioned a cipher disk, 2 concentric wooden circles, each etched with an alphabet. By rotating the inner disk to a secret alignment, correspondence could substitute plain letters for ciphered ones, sending seemingly innocuous strings of symbols that only trusted eyes could decode. While early cipher disks were simplistic, vulnerable to frequency analysis, they gave the powerful a thrill, the illusion of an unbreakable code. Imagine sleeping soundly at night because your letter to the Duke spoke only in mystifying runes. For extra secrecy, some inventors devised letter-locking techniques that turned the folded sheet into its own seal. A letter might be scored and slotted so that folding it a precise way created tabs that locked into each other. Any attempt to open the missive left telltale torn paper. Think origami meets espionage. Recipients needed to know exactly how to unfold and refold the sheet to maintain its integrity. It was a craft within correspondence, a paper puzzle that kept prying eyes at bay, at least until someone deciphered its geometry. Beyond paper, certain cities and courts employed courier networks. In France, the postal system under Cardinal Richelieu pioneered relay riders stationed at intervals along major roads. Each rider galloped his stretch before handing dispatches to the next. Speeds improved dramatically. Where a message might once take weeks, it could now arrive in days. Relay posts built elaborate stables, fresh horses, and rest quarters, turning the road into a human assembly line. Although still expensive and vulnerable to bandits, these courier routes formed the backbone of state communication and would, centuries later, evolve into organized national post offices. Nonetheless, for truly urgent or covert communications, Nothing could beat the flight of a trained pigeon. Breeders in Italian monasteries honed homing pigeons, birds conditioned to return to their home roost from distant lofts. A message, often a tiny rolled parchment, was tied to the bird's leg. Released from an enemy camp or a siege-surrounded city, the pigeon would soar home at respectable speeds. It's said that during diplomatic crises, several dozen pigeons would be dispatched in shifts to ensure at least one reached its destination. The minds I can picture a string of white-winged envoys cutting through clouds, bearing the hopes or secrets of princes on slender scrolls. Meanwhile, scholarly communication underwent a metamorphosis with the advent of the printing press. Before Johannes Gutenberg and his movable type arrived in Mainz around 1450, books were painstakingly copied by hand. A single manuscript, perhaps bound in calfskin, took months or years to produce, making texts rare and precious. Gutenberg's innovation, a matrix of individual metal letters that could be rearranged, inked, and pressed into paper, slashed production times and costs. Suddenly, dozens of copies of a work could be printed in weeks. The first masterpiece of this method was the Gutenberg Bible, an ornate, two-column Latin text adorned with hand-painted initials. Even this early print job retained some medieval luxury, but it set the stage for a revolution. Printers sprang up in dozens of European cities, long before Google Maps existed to guide them. Venetian presses churned out treatises on art, sailing manuals, and cookbooks. Parisian workshops specialized in legal codes, and London printers produced everything from sermon pamphlets to ballads. The printed word spread like wildfire, undermining the monopoly of scribes and monasteries on knowledge. Scholars no longer needed patronage to obtain a copy of a rare text. They could purchase a printed edition for a fraction of the cost. Book fairs in Frankfurt and Lyon became bustling hubs where printers, booksellers, and readers converged, exchanging ideas as eagerly as merchandise. Of course, printing introduced new challenges. Quality control was spotty. Misaligned type produced printers' errors that turned innocuous passages into comical gibberish. One rogue line in a phrasebook instructing travelers to attend Mass mistakenly printed to attend a monkey. Printers employed proofreaders, but errors persisted. Readers learned to decipher meaning from context, turning mistakes into inside jokes. To organize the flood of printed material, catalogs and indexes appeared. One innovative Venetian printer created a title sheet listing available books, grouped by subject and author, updated quarterly. Patrons could peruse the list and place orders by letter or visit the shop. This concept evolved into library catalogs, enabling scholars to locate texts across collections. Imagine a scholar in Padua writing to a bookseller in Paris. I desire 2 copies of Aldus Manutius's Virgil, and perhaps that new arithmetic treatise if available. A network of correspondence and catalogs knitted Europe's learning centers closer together. Communication breakthroughs also touched music. Composers in Italy and Germany sought to share polyphonic works, rich, multi-voiced choral pieces, with distant choirs. Music printers devised specialized type for notes and staffs, allowing exact replication of complex scores. Choirs in Prague could perform the same motet as those in Seville, synchronizing musical culture across vast distances. This standardization created a pan-European repertoire and laid groundwork for the musical editions we enjoy today. Meanwhile, visual communication advanced with the rise of woodcut and engraving techniques. Publishers employed craftsmen to carve images into wooden blocks or engrave metal plates. These could then be inked and pressed alongside text. Illustrated herbals, anatomical atlases, and maps became vivid and more comprehensible. Andreas Vesalius's De Humani Corporis Fabrica, an anatomical masterpiece, included stunning woodcut plates showing musculature and organs. Surgeons and students alike marveled at the realistic depictions. No longer did they rely solely on vague verbal descriptions. Telegraphic ideas also emerged, albeit primitive by modern standards. Signals by fire and smoke atop hilltops formed a relay of visual messages. A system known as a semaphore chain. One Spanish engineer suggested a series of towers along the coast, each equipped with pivoting arms or rotating shutters. By positioning these elements in coded configurations, say, 3 arms at different angles, they could transmit numerical or alphabetical codes visible through telescopes. A warning of an approaching pirate fleet could thus travel over hundreds of miles in hours rather than days. While weather often interfered, fog and rain rendered signals invisible. The method found occasional use in military and maritime communication. Finally, the concept of public notice boards began to form. In bustling city squares, authorities posted proclamations on wooden placards, tax notices, event announcements, and law changes. Town criers amplified the message. An official would ring a bell and recite the announcements aloud. This auditory bulletin board ensured that even the illiterate populace received news. The criers often added theatrical flourishes that must have lulled listeners into a transfer from curiosity to drowsiness, much like the soft chime of church bells as dusk approached. By the 31st of May, 1600, the methods of communication that originated in the Renaissance had irrevocably transformed society. Simple letters no longer sufficed. Machines to encode, replicate, and transmit text reshaped how knowledge and power flowed. Printers became the new gatekeepers of information, while coded discs whispered secrets between embassies. Messengers on horseback raced against pigeons in the skies, and semaphore stations blinked signals across hillsides. Knowledge, once bound to heavy tomes and guarded vaults, now trickled into the hands of merchants, artisans, and students, spreading slowly at first, then cascading like droplets in a storm. As you drift off, let your mind float on the wings of innovation. Imagine a monk hunched by candlelight winding a cipher disk, a printer's apprentice inking type at dawn, or a messenger lighting a semaphore fire on a foggy hilltop. Each flicker of candle or flame, each clatter of type, each pigeon's wing beat brought the world a little closer. Chapter 8: Entertainment and Spectacle Inventions. The Renaissance was a feast not only for the mind but also for the senses. Courts and city squares alike vied to astonish audiences with extravagant entertainments. Pageants, masks, theatrical performances, fireworks displays, and mechanical marvels. Without cinema or television, spectacle was king, and inventors applied their ingenuity to create ever more elaborate devices that blended art, engineering, and sheer showmanship. In this chapter, we'll wander through gilded halls and sunlit plazas to uncover the strangest and sometimes most comical entertainment inventions of the age, each one designed to dazzle spectators, provoke laughter, or simply provide an excuse for nobles to flaunt their wealth in the name of public amusement. Festivals were the lifeblood of city life. To celebrate weddings, military victories, or religious feast days, organizers constructed temporary stages and sets in streets or courtyards. One popular device was the magic bookshelf, a wooden facade lined with painted book spines that, at the right cue, folded outward and descended on hidden pulleys, revealing actors or musicians behind. The effect was one of books magically coming to life. Quite literally, Citizens craned their necks, expecting dusty tomes, only to find brightly dressed courtiers striking poses or plucking lutes. Such mechanical surprises gave new meaning to reading between the lines. Stage plays embraced technology too. Early movable scenery relied on grooves carved into the stage floor. Stagehands, aided by ropes running through pulleys above, would slide painted flats across the grooves, shifting a forest scene into a palace hall in seconds. It was changeable wallpaper with dramatic flair. Quick change mechanisms inside wardrobes allowed actors to transform from shepherds into kings in the blink of an eye. A pluck of a hidden lever would tumble a costume forward as the actor ducked behind the door. One audience member from Venice reportedly shouted, "By St. Mark, that prince became a pauper and back again faster than I can finish my goblet." The ingenuity was both practical, to shorten downtime between acts, and purely entertaining. No Renaissance celebration was complete without fireworks. Gunpowder traveled from China via the Silk Road in the 13th century, and by the 16th century, Italian pyrotechnicians had refined elaborate displays. One engineer built a multi-barrel serpentine device. Dozens of small tubes, each loaded with colored stars, arranged in the shape of a coiling snake. When ignited, the serpent writhed across the night sky, hissing and spitting sparks of red, green, and gold. Courts battled to outdo one another. Prague's fireworks for Emperor Rudolph II reportedly lasted 6 hours, using so much powder that the smell of sulfur lingered for days. Commoners would gather in the streets, noses pinched, children squealing at the blasts, and bettors gambling on which color lasted longest. Intricate carnival floats paraded through city streets, sometimes mounted on hidden wheels that pivoted at the tug of a rope. One memorable design was a giant sea monster with flapping jaws and glowing eyes. Inside, a puppeteer worked bellows to produce rumbling growls, while colored lanterns cast eerie light through painted scales. As the creature lumbered by, nobles tossed coins into its open mouth, believing, if only theatrically, that they paid homage to Neptune himself. It was communal, theater on a grand scale, powered by pulleys, gears, and a hefty dose of civic pride. Mechanical automata were a staple of courtly entertainment. Think of wind-up robots centuries before the term robot existed. In France, an inventor presented a mechanical peacock made of wood and brass, complete with articulated feathers that fanned out at the turn of a crank. It strutted on jointed legs, its beak opening to reveal tiny bells that jingled as it moved. Guests at Catherine de' Medici's court reportedly gasped when the peacock performed 3 choreographed steps. Equally enchanting was a mechanical organ, an upright barrel organ, where pinned wooden cylinders rotated by hand, pushing air through flutes and reeds to play popular tunes. The organist need not be present. The machine played itself, delighting audiences who whispered that magic powers were at work. Theater lanterns and stage lighting also saw invention. Glass-making advances allowed for colored lenses, red, blue, and green, that could be slid into iron frames in front of candles or oil lamps. A stage manager could darken half the scene by sliding a blue pane across, creating an instant moonlit forest. Smoke machines emerged by burning damp straw in hidden braziers, letting wisps of fog drift onto the stage. The combination of colored light and smoke evoked otherworldly realms. Witches, Sabbaths, enchanted groves, and phantom ships at sea. One 1590s masque in London featured a ship of fools sailing through a misty harbor, an optical marvel made with draped silk, lamps concealed beneath water, and painted moving backdrops. Court masks, elaborate performances combining dance, Music, poetry, and elaborate set pieces were theatrical highlights. Inigo Jones, chief architect for the English court, designed intricate stage machinery for these masks. One device raised performers from beneath the stage via trapdoors, so that gods like Apollo could descend in chariots drawn by gilded swans. Other effects included rotating islands, rising ships, and a floating sphere that opened to reveal allegorical figures. The machinery was powered by teams of stagehands turning cranks and heaving ropes. Backstage labor unseen by the audience but essential to the spectacle. Contemporary diaries note that the noise backstage could rival the performance itself. A low, mechanical rumble as pulleys strained under weight, wooden planks creaking, and men swearing in time to the music. Music itself saw inventive amplifications. In some Italian palaces, architects installed singing galleries, elevated balconies with hidden valves that, when opened, channeled wind through pipes to create haunting chords. On festival days, a breeze would pass through these galleries, adding a sinuous musical accompaniment to banquets below. It was less predictable than a lute player but infinitely more atmospheric, a ghostly organ sounding through colonnades without visible organist or instrument. Street theater thrived alongside courtly pageantry. Traveling performers, jugglers, acrobats, and minstrels relied on simple but ingenious props. A juggler's clubs might contain weighted cores, allowing for slower, more graceful throws. An acrobat's balancing pole had swivel-mounted weights at each end, enabling finer adjustments to leverage. Puppeteers developed rod puppets with multiple control points, head, arms, and even jaw, allowing for expressive performances. One Venetian puppeteers. Marionette show featured a lion and a bear boxing ring, an uproarious spectacle that drew crowds of merchants and gondoliers. All these devices were handcrafted, often repaired nightly, and transported in leather satchels and wooden trunks. Fairs and markets incorporated sound effects contraptions to advertise themselves. Drum towers, wooden scaffolds with mounted drums, were erected at fair entrances. At dawn, a drummer in a raised booth struck a gong to announce the opening. Nearby, sky trumpets, long serpentine horns, were used to call patrons from neighboring fields. The clarity of their notes, amplified across open land, was the Renaissance equivalent of a radio jingle, summoning peasants by curiosity or hunger to sample. Roasted meats and musical performances. Optical entertainments also captured imaginations. Peep shows consisted of small wooden boxes with a peephole. Inside, hand-painted miniature scenes were backlit by candles and enhanced with lenses to create depth. A peasant might pay a farthing to glimpse scenes of Venice's Grand Canal or a fairy forest inhabited by sprites. Early stereoscopes used pairs of images and simple lenses to produce 3D effects, though often requiring the viewer to hold the device at awkward angles until a cramp set in. Still, these optical marvels were the closest thing to a visual time machine available then. Equestrian spectacles, tournaments, and horse ballets also benefited from inventive gear. Ramps, winches, and hidden trapdoors allowed riders to vanish or appear on demand. In a notable display, a rider dressed as Mars descended from heaven into the lists. A brass harness under his tunic connected to an overhead winch, lowering him to the arena in full armor. The crowd roared as he landed, spurs ringing. Later, he was raised aloft to fight an imaginary dragon engraved on a retractable screen. Such stunts borrowed from theatrical machines but adapted to the dusty oval of the jousting field. Festive banquets, too, employed mechanical wonders. One nobleman's banquet of birds featured platters that, at a signal, would spin open compartments to reveal songbirds in cages, chirping amid silver tureens. Another host installed a chandelier rigged to descend at the meal's climax, revealing a miniature fireworks display of colored smoke and sparks around the grapes. Guests who survived the surprise emerged exhilarated or mildly singed. A guest list rumor that added to the household's mystique. In private chambers, curiosities abounded. Cabinet makers built wondercammer boxes, portable cabinets of curiosities, with drawers and hidden panels holding oddities like shells, fossils, and automaton insects that screeched when wound. Patrons entertained select visitors by opening secret compartments, eliciting gasps at mechanical beetles that clicked their legs or small birds that chirped when released. Such intimate spectacles were the Renaissance salon's answer to a movie trailer, a teaser of wonder to spark enlightened conversation. Renaissance spectacle didn't always go as planned. One Venetian fireworks show accidentally signaled a real military salute. Civilians panicked, believing the Ottoman fleet had returned. In Florence, an over-amped mask machinery collapsed mid-performance, sending allegorical statues crashing into each other, prompting the poet to ad-lib. Even the statues quarrel in these troubled times. Yet these mishaps became stories retold in taverns, adding layers of humor and human frailty to the otherwise grand illusions. Thus, in theaters, streets, gardens, and private chambers alike, Renaissance inventors and entertainers wove mechanics into their art. Gears, pulleys, steam in rare cases, and wind-powered displays that blurred the line between reality and enchantment. Crowds gasped at synthetic dragons breathing colored smoke, wept at ghostly apparitions rising from trapdoors, and cheered at peacocks that strutted by clockwork. These inventions were not mere gadgets, but expressions of an age that reveled in blending beauty, technology, and surprise. As you settle deeper towards sleep, picture the glow of oil lamps on carved wood, the hiss of powder behind canvas screens, the quiet turn of a brass key winding hidden springs, each sound a heartbeat of Renaissance imagination. These spectacles remind us that, even centuries ago, humans craved wonder, and that inventors labored to deliver it in the form of moving statues, painting changing scenery, and birdsong from brass. Chapter 9: Architecture and Construction Inventions. Renaissance cities rose from medieval foundations into landscapes of soaring domes, elegant palazzi, and ornate cathedrals. Behind every breathtaking facade lay an array of mechanical aids and ingenious techniques devised to lift massive stones, shape intricate carvings, and coordinate armies of laborers. In this chapter, we'll wander through bustling building sites and drawing offices to explore the contraptions and processes that turned architectural dreams into realities. Machines powered by human, animal, water, and sometimes wind energy, all in service of stone and mortar. From hoisting towers to movable scaffolds, these inventions not only shaped the skyline but also defined how architects and engineers collaborated across great distances. Construction began with quarrying. Marble and limestone blocks were extracted from mountainsides using wedges of metal and wood. To split a block, workers drove wooden wedges into drilled holes and then soaked them with water. As the wedges swelled, the stone cracked along predetermined lines. Some quarries introduced screw-driven wedges, iron rods threaded through collars that, when turned by large wrenches, exerted tremendous pressure and completed splits more precisely. This innovation reduced waste, allowing masons to obtain smoother, more regular blocks for columns and walls. Once quarried, stones needed to travel to construction sites. Heavy carts pulled by oxen hoof-trod rough roads. To ease the journey, some regions laid temporary plank roads or used greased wooden rollers underneath sledges carrying blocks. But by the early 16th century, enterprising engineers experimented with canal barges. Narrow waterways tunneled through hillsides or dug along riverbanks. Barges laden with stone floated gently downstream, reducing wear on roads and injuries among draft animals. Where waters failed to reach, inclined plane railways powered by rope and capstan offered another solution. Wagons on wooden rails could be pulled up steep slopes by teams operating winches at the top. On site, the first barrier was getting materials up to height. Simple cranes, a vertical mast with an attached jib, had existed for centuries, but Renaissance builders enhanced them with treadwheel winches. Imagine a giant hamster wheel turned by workers walking inside. This motion wound rope around an axle, lifting blocks dozens of meters skyward. The treadwheel crane became a ubiquitous sight at cathedral projects, its wooden spokes gleaming in the sun as laborers marched in cadence. Compared to hand-cranked winches, treadwheels could lift heavier loads with fewer strains on the crew. Though they required careful coordination, one false step could send a stone plummeting. Scaffolding kept pace with rising walls. Rather than simple poles lashed together, some sites employed movable scaffolding towers on wheels. These timber frameworks were braced by diagonal struts and counterweights. Once a section of wall rose to a new height, carpenters released the wheel locks and rolled the entire tower forward, relocking it in place. This saved hours of dismantling and rebuilding static scaffolds and reduced downtime, letting builders maintain rhythm during construction. Seasons. Surveying was critical to ensure walls rose plumb and columns aligned. Medieval builders used plumb bobs, weights suspended on cords, but Renaissance surveyors developed the geometric square. Two wooden arms connected by a hinge, each marked with graduations. By placing one arm against a wall and aligning a plumb bob, the surveyor could read off the angle on the other arm, confirming verticality or measuring inclines. The tool could also serve as a right angle for laying foundations. Squarely. Though rudimentary compared to modern theodolites, geometric squares improved accuracy and facilitated quality control across sprawling sites. Architects relied on detailed plans, but craftsmen at distant workshops sometimes misread drawings. To prevent errors, master builders introduced full-scale templates of arches and vault ribs cut from thin boards. These templates, known as trace templates, were hoisted up and used to scribe precise stone profiles. Carvers knew exactly where to cut, ensuring each voussoir or rib element fit seamlessly. This invention bridged the gap between the drawing table and the quarry, allowing complex forms like pointed arches and ribbed vaults to materialize with mathematical precision. Vault construction itself was a marvel of technique. Builders erected temporary wooden centering, arch-shaped frameworks supporting stones until the keystone locked the arch, designing centering for intersecting ribs, common in Gothic vaults, required adjustable timber scaffolds. Some sites used modular centering kits, prefabricated wooden segments with mortise and tenon joints that could be assembled into various rib geometries. This modular approach sped up vault erection as carpenters could stockpile components and reconfigure them according to each bay's dimensions. Masons carving ornamental details benefited from mechanical pantograph devices. A metal arm with hinged links could trace a small-scale model of a carved motif. The arm's opposite end, connected by proportional links, cut a larger version into the stone block. Although early pantographs were delicate and prone to bending under heavy loads, they allowed sculptors to replicate complex patterns floral scrolls, heraldic shields, or Madonna figures, with fidelity and consistency across multiple pillars or facades. Working at height posed hazards. To mitigate risks, some building sites rigged safety harnesses. Leather belts strapped around a worker's waist and tethered by a rope to an overhead beam. While far from modern fall arrest systems, these harnesses provided a measure of security when carving capitals on high scaffolds. Additionally, canvas dust sheets were stretched below carving areas to catch falling chips, reducing injuries to workers underneath. Church towers and domes called for specialized machinery for masonry and mortar mixing. Foundations often lay below water tables. Workers deployed hand-operated water pumps, chain and bucket systems to keep trenches dry. These pumps used an endless leather belt of buckets running over pulleys, lifting groundwater to the surface. By clearing muddy pits, masons could lay dense stone footings on solid ground rather than precarious soil. Mortar mixers underwent iterations too. Hand-tamped mortars, where laborers stomped mixtures in shallow pits, were replaced on larger projects by rotary mixers. Wooden drums perched at an angle rotated by animal power or treadle systems. Inside the drum, paddles turned lime, sand, and water into uniform mortar. The consistency improved wall strength and reduced cracking, though some purists argued that hand tamping gave better texture. Even so, blends mixed mechanically cut labor by half, and allowed walls to rise faster before weather turned mortar brittle. Heavy wooden beams spanning halls or supporting roofs demanded precise raising. Timber jack inventions used block and tackle pulleys combined with movable jack screws. Workers anchored a ratcheting jack under one end of a beam and connected it to a higher pulley block. As the jack lifted incrementally, rope passed over the pulley, elevating the beam until it nested into place on corbels or trusses. This system endured for centuries, underpinning the construction of great halls and galleries. In the leading Renaissance city of Florence, Filippo Brunelleschi famously devised revolutionary methods to build the dome of Santa Maria del Fiore without traditional centering. He designed a double shell dome with herringbone brick courses that self-supported each other. But to hoist materials, he invented a vertical hoisting machine, a reversible winch powered by oxen that could lower or raise loads in either direction without re-rigging. The machine's bearings and gears were so well balanced that a single turning of the capstan could shift hundreds of kilograms. Weekend demonstrations amused curious onlookers who watched bricks and mortar shoot skyward like fireworks. Sawing stone and would also saw mechanization. Water-powered sawmills introduced from Northern Europe used vertical reciprocating saw blades for timber cutting. Some mills adapted circular saws spun by water wheel gears, one of the earliest instances of rotary saw technology. These mills cut planks for scaffolding and timbers for roofs faster than any crew of adze-wielding lumberjacks. Similarly, stone saw pits fitted with iron blades worked by treadles enabled sculptors to slice marble. Slabs with less physical strain, although water lubrication and grit from sand made the process messy and noisy. Beyond masonry, ironworkers supplied nails, brackets, and tie rods. Forge-powered bellows grew more efficient with crankshafts and pottery valves, forcing hotter air into hearths. Blacksmiths could then forge larger beams and braces. Meanwhile, portable forges, small hearths mounted on wheels, followed building parties, repairing hardware and shoeing scaffolding dogs, wooden wheels called dogs to grip timbers, on site. Communication between architects and builders often spanned months. To coordinate teams across multiple cities, master builders carried personal instruction manuscripts, portable pocket notebooks filled with to-do lists, dimensions, and sketches. These booklets of measurements served as the era's project management tools. Some notes were written in cipher or shorthand to protect trade secrets. recipes for mortar mixes, or special carving techniques that gave one workshop an edge over rivals. Cities themselves became laboratories for hydraulic engineering. Fountains and aqueducts supplied clean water for households and construction. Venetian engineers designed submerged pneumatic siphons delivering fresh water under canals to public wells. On hilltop towns, reversible water-powered pumps lifted water uphill through leather hoses in stages, an antecedent to modern multi-stage pumps. These systems not only quenched citizens' thirst but also powered sawmills and hoists, harnessing the latent energy of rivers to build the very cities they nourished. Urban planning took shape through the coordinated use of surveying tools and mechanical markers. Officials placed stone boundary markers, often carved with coats of arms, at key intersections. Streets were widened or reoriented according to plans laid out with measuring wheels, a wheel with spoke marks that recorded revolutions, and chalk lines. This mechanical precision reduced disputes over property and allowed for the grand boulevards and plazas that define Renaissance cityscapes. Finally, construction governance evolved alongside technology. Guilds mandated quality standards and oversaw the training of apprentices. Journeymen learned to operate machines, treadwheels, cranes, and mixers under the watchful eye of masters. Apprentices kept detailed notebooks documenting machine maintenance, gear ratios, and rope care, a record-keeping practice that foreshadowed modern engineering logs. Thus, the architecture and construction inventions of the Renaissance married age-old craftsmanship with mechanical ingenuity. From spring-driven wedges in quarries to reversible hoisting machines on cathedral scaffolds. From modular centering kits for vaults to water-powered sawmills. From pantograph carving devices to magnetic compasses for site alignment, each tool and contraption reflected a culture chasing precision, speed, and scale. As you drift toward dreams, imagine workers marching. Inside a massive treadwheel, oxen turning winches, and draftsmen unfolding full-scale templates under the Tuscan sun. Each a silent partner in creating the stone symphonies that still define our skylines. Chapter 10: Everyday Science and Household Curiosities. In the quiet corners of Renaissance homes and workshops, inventors turned their curiosity inward, devising subtle contraptions that blurred the lines between science, art, and daily life. Far from grand domes and war machines, these smaller devices brought wonder, and sometimes frustration, to kitchens, studies, parlors, and gardens. In this final chapter, we explore the everyday science and household curiosities of the age. From self-stirring cauldrons to mechanical clocks that chimed the hours, from weather predictors made of glass to early chemical novelties that dazzled guests. Each invention reveals the Renaissance impulse to elevate the mundane through tinkering, turning daily routines into gentle experiments and delightful distractions. One of the most beloved household marvels was the mechanical coffee grinder. As coffee began its European ascent in the 17th century, grinders evolved beyond simple mortars and pestles. Craftsmen fashioned iron burr mills with conical stones inside a wooden hopper. A hand crank outside turned the burrs, crushing beans into grounds of varying fineness. Some models incorporated adjustable screws to control grind size. An early nod to user customization, though noisy and requiring elbow grease. These grinders promised a consistent brew, transforming mornings from groggy rituals into caffeinated rituals of precision. In parallel, tea infusions popularized another curious device. The tea strainer stand, a pierced metal basket suspended on a tripod, allowed leaves to steep over a cup, then lifted by a lever to drain the liquor. The contraption relieved hosts from awkwardly fishing leaves with spoons. Early versions featured small clockwork timers, tiny brass drums that clicked down minutes before tipping the strainer. Whether the bells rang precisely or not, guests appreciated the show, a miniature performance that preceded the first sip of warmth. Kitchens also sported self-stirring cauldrons, pottery vessels fit with an internal float connected to paddles. As simmering liquids bubbled, the float oscillated, turning the paddles and keeping soups from sticking. The mechanism was simple: a buoyant cork or hollow wooden sphere linked to a spindle. Often these cauldrons misbehaved, with paddles spinning too briskly and splashing broth across hearthstones. Yet the sight of a pot stirring itself enchanted onlookers, especially visiting dignitaries eager for tales of domestic sorcery. Butter churns invited similar automation. Traditional dasher and barrel models required vigorous up and down pounding. Some inventors introduced crank handles that drove internal paddles in circular motions. A ratchet mechanism prevented the handle from spinning backward, ensuring continuous churning. The result: butter appeared faster and with less effort, and creamy, too. Housekeepers reported that crank churns reduced overall churning time by half, freeing village women to tend gardens or mend lace rather than wrestle spoiling cream. Fire-powered chemistry sets also found their way into kitchens. Apothecary jars of salts, acids, and powders tempted chefs to experiment with caramelization and pickling. One popular curiosity was sugar glass, a confectioner's imitation of blown glass made by heating sugar, water, and a dash of vinegar, then shaping it with molds. The translucent results glowed under candlelight, mounted as centerpieces in banquet halls before being delightedly bitten apart by guests. The effect was a sweet alchemy, turning humble cane sugar into something that resembled crystal. In studies and libraries, mechanical clocks reigned supreme. Long case clocks, early grandfather clocks, housed weight-driven movements with verge escapements and ornate pendulum crutches. Each hour, a bell struck inside the oak case. Some clocks included automata. Little wooden figures emerged from doors, bowed, or struck miniature gongs. Others displayed astrological dials, indicating moon phases and zodiac signs. Wealthy scholars prized these timepieces not only for keeping hours but as symbols of cosmic harmony, matching the clock's gears to the celestial spheres they studied. Smaller timekeepers adorned desks, pocket sundials, portable brass circles with folding gnomons, allowed travelers to tell time by the sun. Yet even on overcast days, gourmets and merchants relied on candle clocks, cylindrical wax candles marked with hourly notches. As the candle burned down, each notch signaled the passing of an hour. Variations used 2 candles alternately or colored stripes of wax for quarter-hour intervals. Though imprecise and requiring constant supervision, candle clocks offered a more tangible sense of time than mere morning shadows. Weather prediction captivated many households. Glass barometers remained decades away, but an accidental curiosity emerged in wine cellars: the weather glass, a sealed glass sphere half filled with water hung in windows. On stormy nights, the water level rose in the spout due to falling barometric pressure. On fair days, it receded. Mariners and landlubbers alike admired this simple instrument, though they debated its reliability. Some swore it foresaw rain by the next sunrise, others blamed capillary action. Regardless, the glass sphere's small undulations lent homes an aura of natural prophecy. For reading and writing, book holder stands and quill sharpening rigs took the stage. A wooden book cradle, adjustable at various angles, held heavy folios open for hours of study. Its sliding clamps prevented pages from flipping in drafts, and its base often contained a small compartment for ink and quills. Nearby, a quill-sharpening lathe, foot-powered or hand-cranked, spun the feather tip against a rotating grindstone, producing uniformly sharp nibs for consistent handwriting. Scribes swore by these rigs. No longer did they labor over uneven cuts, and calligraphy flourished as scripts grew more elegant. In parlors, conversation pieces were mechanical music boxes, tiny, hand-cranked cylinders with steel pins plucking tuned teeth of a comb. Simple tunes, a lullaby, a folk song, emerged, charming guests. More ambitious models coupled the music box with a rotating diorama. Painted wooden scenes of pastoral dances turning behind a glass plate as the melody played. Children and adults alike were mesmerized by the interplay of sound and scene. A prelude to modern animated films. Mirrors, too, became more than reflective surfaces. Venetian glassmakers perfected mercury-backed mirrors, but some artisans added a turning mechanism. A mirror mounted on a lazy Susan-like platform that rotated when a concealed lever was pressed. This allowed dandies to check their attire from multiple angles without rising from their chairs. In candlelit rooms, the facets of cut glass cartridges around the mirror's edge refracted light, scattering prismatic glints like fireflies, an optical delight that elevated grooming to performance. Household chemistry extended to cleaning. Soap-making kits appeared in urban kitchens. Small cauldrons with stirrers allowed the mixing of animal fats and lye derived from wood ash. By adjusting the fat-to-alkali ratio, homemakers could produce soaps of varying hardness and scent, adding herbs like lavender or rosemary for fragrance. Though no mechanical miracle, the process's predictability improved with stirred kettles and temperature gauges. Glass tubes dipped into the vat, marking notches for the ideal saponification point. In bedside tables, apothecaries' dreamers left jars of smelling salts and distilled waters, drying apparatuses, simple stills made of copper pots and coiled tubes, allowed families to distill rosewater or bitter almond essence. A gentle fire beneath the pot vaporized the essence, which condensed in the coil and dripped into a receiving flask. The fragrant liquids found uses in medicine, cosmetics, and perfumery. Even the poorest cottage boasted a small still, its hiss at dusk promising, revitalizing scents to escape the day's must and mire. Wind-up automata migrated from courtly salons into genteel homes. Small figures, a dancing couple, a nodding dog, perched on mantelpieces. A concealed key turned a spring that activated cams pushing levers and joints. Though delicate and prone to spring fatigue, these miniatures amused guests during afternoon tea. A smiling automaton raising a tiny teacup or a musical bird opening its beak in time with a bell. They were the ultimate conversation starters. Testament to human ingenuity, harnessed in miniature. And finally, in garden retreats, inventors left the grandest curiosities. Temperature-sensitive fountains, taps connected to concealed cold and warm water pipes led to an urn, a hidden thermostat, an early bimetallic strip of two metals expanding differently with heat, opened a valve when air warmed, letting a fountain spritz warm water. When cooled, it switched to a chilly stream. Gardeners claimed these fountains provided refreshing mists on hot afternoons or gentle drizzles to cool the air, though maintenance was complex. Metal strips needed recalibration, and leaks abounded. Yet the promise of a temperature-responsive feature in a Renaissance garden remains the stuff of dreamy legend. Thus concludes our journey through the domestic marvels of the Renaissance. A realm where morning coffee met clockwork, where soups stirred themselves, and where libraries boasted rotating mirrors alongside cryptic code disks. From chemistry sets to candy glass, from self-stirring pots to weather foresight spheres, these inventions infused daily routines with wonder and experimentation. As you drift into slumber, let the soft clicks of gears and the quiet hiss of distilled vapors lull you, imagining workshops where curious hands honed each device. In these humble halls, science and household life braided together, leaving behind a legacy of ingenuity that still whispers through our kitchens, studies, and gardens, reminding us that even the simplest acts can be miracles of invention. Sleep well, dream of cogwheels turning under candlelight, and remember, sometimes the smallest contraptions hold the greatest magic.